All right, without too much effort, I've got both of my Ferraris in the same shot. I've had as many as 3, 4, maybe, I don't know. I've had a bunch of Ferraris at the same time, and today I'm going to tell you how or what you should be looking for when you buy a Ferrari, or that could sort of go into any other exotic car for that matter. But first, today's video is sponsored by Anson Belts, and I will get into that in the end, but they're very cool, and I'm very happy. I think it's because I've been dressing so dapper lately. A lot of cool products have been coming to me and saying, share us with the world, because you're a smooth-looking motherfucker. Can I say that? We should probably that out because it's sponsored. Anyway, we're going to talk about buying, and at least buying Ferraris for the moment, and as I said, it'll translate over to other exotic cars. There's some weird stigmas when it comes to exotic cars, and I don't really understand them. There is the stigma, even when I've been selling some cars, even my GT3. Well, how many owners does it have? What does it matter? Like, there's a completely meaningless statistic, and that statistic only comes into play with a salvage car, a lemon law car, anything like that. You'd want to look how many owners and how long they kept it, because if there was a weird title on the car and for some reason the car turned over very frequently and there's always a stack of repair bills, you may just have a bad car that people are getting rid of and they don't want to have anything to do with it. Those cars are usually priced very aggressively and you can sort of stay away from them. But any other standard Ferrari or Lamborghini or exotic car, for that matter, the number of owners should be a completely irrelevant statistic. The 488s, for example, a lot of cars, here is the life cycle of Ferraris. They come out, somebody buys it. Guy keeps it for a couple of months, sells it to somebody else, gets a different one. That trade happens many times because these cars sell over sticker, over MSRP. And that's a very common thing. You get it, you keep it for a couple hundred miles, maybe a couple thousand miles, you sell it. And it's not weird to see a car, even now when you go back over a decade, a car that's had 4 or 5 owners in the first 12 to 16 months. Even LaFerraris, Enzos, those cars are super popular. They'll change hands just as the price goes up. People, oh, I want that, I'll pay $1.5 million, I'll pay 1.7. Sold. That guy made 200 grand, that guy then sells it for 2. That guy made 300 grand. So as these markets go up, it's sort of an investment. So looking at a car and saying, well, how does a 130-mile LaFerrari have 7 owners? That shouldn't deter you from buying the car, and clearly it doesn't, but a lot of people like to look at the number of owners and thinks that has any bearing on the quality of the car, and it doesn't. And maybe in a pedestrian car or something else, if it changes hands a lot, it may be reason for concern, but exotic cars, you go back and look, I think the 430 Spider I have, it was an early '05, so fully loaded in options. And those cars tend to have a lot of ownership changes because it's a new car. The first guy is just, he's a big wig. Whoever gets it is clearly in the good graces of Ferrari. They get the car, they keep it for a couple of months, they sell it, they get a different one, they get a coupe, they get the special editions. They seem to trade hands a lot. So it's not unreasonable to see it in an exotic car with a couple of thousand miles and 5 owners, 10 owners, whatever, it doesn't really matter. These exotic cars are not necessarily treated like most people would treat a Corvette or just a Porsche or a regular sports car. When I say Porsche, like a 911 or a Boxster. Limited edition Porsches, like fancy cars, exotic cars, it's not uncommon to see a lot of owners, so that shouldn't be a deterrent. Now, I also said mileage. Mileage also comes into play. You want to see roughly how many miles somebody puts on a car, because it could be consistent with either a rollback, and this is strangely relevant right now. I just read today, which is Monday, that there is a guy who worked at a Ferrari dealership who's suing the Ferrari dealership claiming that they rolled back cars. And that's rolling back odometers on exotic cars is not an uncommon practice. I've had it in other videos where I think it's probably 50 to 60% of exotic cars get rolled back. But that's not a factory thing. That's not a dealership thing. If there is, I can't speak on behalf of any dealer. There could be a rogue dealer out there doing it. But every dealer that I've worked with, and I've worked with a lot of Ferrari dealerships, never would it even occur to me to even say, hey buddy, I think you can roll this car. It's just, they're straight shooters as far as that goes. So I've seen a lot of that in the aftermarket, and I know guys that actually do it. And there's a lot of companies, there was even one of the videos where I was driving somebody's car, and then when somebody was watching it said, oh, it's funny the odometer doesn't move, because they must have disconnected the odometer. So it is a very common thing in exotic cars. Why because it's market driven. For some reason, people care if a car has less miles on it, when that's not necessarily good for the car. To sit around and rot forever, that's not really why a car was designed. I mean, you want, it's designed to be driven, but even a car that you want to buy as a driver or a collector's piece, you'd still want it to be mechanically sound. In order to do that, you have to keep the car running. So that means you have to drive it every once in a while. You don't just park it and leave it and say like, well, that car should really be worth a lot of money. Unless it's a 0-mile factory wrapping collector car, which, why do you do that? I don't know why you do that. You do that to car number one, the first and last car of any production you can keep as a collector car. Everything else you should drive. But ultimately, mileage rollbacks, number of owners, those are the things you're looking at when you're buying an exotic car, and then you're going to do a PPI. But you're looking at if there was, I caught the one car I was looking to buy. It was a Porsche, and I found out it was a rollback because if you look at Logic, there was a car that was a year old. It had 15,000 miles on it. It was purchased by the second owner, who was the guy who tried to sell it to me. And it was 15,000 miles. He kept it for like 3 years and put like 300 miles a year on it. And I was like, well, that doesn't make a lot of sense. And I didn't even realize who it was at the time. I figured out it was his car later. But it was a car that if you're buying a first-year car, or if you're buying a car that's a year old with 15,000 miles, you're not a collector, you're a driver. You're buying a exotic car or a specialty car with miles on it. It's because you want to drive it and you want to buy it at a cheaper price. It's not because you're a collector. So when I saw he only put 300 miles on it a year for 3 years, something definitely smelled off. I was right. I found out a bunch of miles were put on the car and it was rolled back. Very common in the exotic car world. So it's something you want to watch out for. You want to look at the Carfax reports, the auto checks. You want to get a PPI, which is probably the single most important thing you can do when buying an exotic car, is getting a pre-purchase inspection, which is you bring the car to a dealership or an independent mechanic who you trust. They will check out the paint, they will check out the suspension, the undercarriage. A lot of people that crash exotic cars won't go through insurance. They don't want it to go up. So they fix it themselves, or they fix it sloppily or whatever it is, because fixing an exotic car can be expensive. So you want to make sure if the car was repaired, you know about it, and it wasn't significant. You want to make sure it was repaired well. You want to make sure the wear and tear on the car is consistent with the mileage on it. You want to look at the Carfax reports and see the owner history and see that it's consistent with the mileage that's on the car. If it was a collector car, it's very possible that a bunch of people traded hands, it sat in a bunch of garages and wasn't driven. But you want to make sure of that by seeing ownership history. If you see one guy put 10,000 miles a year on it, and then the next guys are all collectors or something like that, maybe something where you want to step back. Ultimately, when you buy an exotic car, the thing you want to look for is the condition. And you look at the condition, you look at the health of the car. If you want to go so far as doing a compression check and a leak down, knock yourself out. But those are the big ticket things that you want to be aware of when you're buying a car. Unless you're buying it new, I know the only car that I've ever owned that I know the mileage is correct on is the 488 Spider, because I got it brand new. I'm the first owner on it. And there's zero doubt that nobody has touched that car. I bought it with like 57 miles on it, which is the gentleman over in Maranello testing it around Fiorano, and then shipping it to the United States, it going through the port, making it to the dealership, maybe getting driven to the gas station, and then handed over to me. So that being said, those are the things you want to look out for. You want to make sure you're getting a car in good condition, and ultimately you want to drive the things. I mean, you don't know what the past history is. You always take that risk when buying an exotic car, but you can safeguard and protect yourself in multiple ways by sort of following basic logic and not worrying about stuff like, well, it's got a bunch of owners. Nobody cares. And ultimately, saying a car has had a lot of owners should not devalue any car. It could be cause for concern if the pattern of ownership is weird, but having 50, but whatever, having a dozen owners on a car in 20 years shouldn't be a big deal. It's not something you should focus on. Don't sweat it, and don't try to beat somebody up over that. That's a very stupid argument to make. Whenever somebody tells me something like that, I tell them to take a walk, and it makes you look like an amateur because you don't know what you're talking about, being like, wow, there's 7 owners on this car. Yeah, get over it. It doesn't mean that the car there's anything wrong with it. Do your inspection, make sure the mileage is consistent, make sure the wear and tear is consistent with the car, and buy yourself a nice car. Now that I have your attention, I hope, I'm going to solve your life or fix a problem in your life, which is belts. And belts, you don't realize you have problems with belts until you own them. And it's not new technology, but Anson Belt Company, they make these belt buckles, which are interchangeable and nice, so you can make this belt into this belt. They give you an extra long piece of leather. You can order one of 40 or 50, 60 types of leather. And the best part about the belts, it's a micro adjustable belt, so you can tighten it, tighten it, tighten it as tight as you want to go. But this little button here in the bottom will loosen your belt, so you can tighten it, loosen it, do whatever you want. I am a big fan of not wasting money, and I think for 3 belts, it was like 99 bucks or so. Check them out on the website. I'll put a link in the description. Save your money on that designer fancy stuff and get something and support. My favorite thing about this is you support family businesses. Thank you guys for watching. Go scoop yourself up an exotic car. Go scoop yourself up a belt if that's all you can afford right now and you just like to think about getting an exotic car. I appreciate you watching the channel. Make sure you subscribe below or in the end card if you haven't already. I will see you next time.